What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today, and it's time for my Week 3 edition of the Tailgate Nate Power 30. I go through and I rank what I believe are the best 30 teams in college football, and there is a ton of change after a crazy, chaotic week, but a lot of statements were made this week as well. There is massive change in the rankings. Do we have some fluctuation towards the top and some new blood is entering in the bottom? Who's it going to be? You'll find out in a little bit. My name is Nate Pope, otherwise known as Tailgate Nate. I'm a sports media graduate with a massive passion for everything that happens in the world of sports, but especially the world of college football. You want to join me in my journey through this college football season? Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell if you like what you see in here, and lock in to everything I got going on during the college football season. And you want to support my other journey to reach as high as I can in the professional world of sports media? Follow me on social media at TailgateNate29, Twitter, Instagram, and wherever else you like to peruse through the socials. Thank you all so much for supporting and interacting with me, however you all may be doing so. With all that said and done and out of the way, it's time to dive into the Week 3 edition of the Power 30. Man, guys, there are a ton of teams that you can put into this list. The 30 teams that I believe represent the best 30 teams in the country start as follows. We go from the bottom and we work our way up to the top, starting off with number 30. They did fall after last week, but I am putting the Louisville Cardinals sticking into this poll. It was between them and I believe BYU was the other team that I considered to slot in here. Louisville ended up being that team that sits at number 30. Oh, Tulane, the other team that I could have kept in there. They did fall out of the poll. But, man, Louisville, they had some shaky moments there against James Madison this past week, but ultimately were able to pull away. And I think that shows a lot about how this Louisville team is built in the way that, Miller Moss has not had a fantastic game yet. I'm just going to tell you right now, Miller Moss has not looked at all like I thought he was going to look at the beginning of the season. Isaac Brown really saved Louisville's skin this past week, 104 yards on 78 carries. The offense, okay, I mean, it was moving solidly enough, but man, this is the James Madison team that's going to be really tough for a lot of teams to beat. 2 turnovers killed the Dukes, and James Madison was the better team in that game. Louisville doubled James Madison on the scoreboard. They won by 14. Don't get it fooled. James Madison, I believe, was the better team, but Louisville hung on to win. They showed perseverance. They got those crucial turnovers, and they capitalized off of them. That's part of the big reason I decided to keep them in the poll when I could have easily dropped them out, because I just don't think they looked that crisp. We'll see if Louisville starts to turn it on as their schedule starts to get a little tougher here. James Madison, I think, was a really good test for that Cardinal team, and they came out on top. Enter Missouri, the first time that they are into the Power 30 this year, and I love what I saw from the Tigers, at least offensively, in that game against Kansas. Defense, yeah, okay, you can turn some things on here and there, but overall, I really like the way that Missouri played, and especially even that defense really was able to turn it on as you went down the stretch there in that game. This was a fascinating game to watch, and it's a fascinating game to try and break down. Kansas really poured it on this Tiger defense in the first quarter, but really beyond that, this Missouri defense, for the most part, held their own, came back to end up tying the thing right there at halftime. They ended up figuring out Jalen Daniels throughout this game, and this Missouri defensive front was fantastic, only limiting Kansas, a rushing attack that's been dangerous throughout the most part this year, to only 28 yards, 1.5 yards per carry, really making Jalen Daniels win the thing through the air, which is not the strong suit of that Kansas offense. Held the Jayhawks to only 251 yards, really exploded offensively. Kansas defense got a lot of issues. Missouri is a team that I thought looked really impressive this week. They're going to be one of those under-the-radar teams. I believe they might even have made the top 25 poll. So watch out for the Tigers, man. They play like that. They're going to be a really, really dangerous side. Was very impressed with Bo Pribula, 334 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jamal Roberts and Ahmad Hardy, the running back duo, had a phenomenal day, so on and so forth. Man, did Nebraska look impressive against Akron. I dropped them out a couple weeks ago, or last week I did. Now I'd throw them back in. I'm telling you guys, there's something different about this Nebraska side this year. This is not your typical oh, Nebraska, they'll walk through their competition and they're going to struggle when they get to the Big Ten. No, guys, this team's going to be very competitive. The defense really looked great against Akron. The offense looked outstanding. It looked unstoppable. Raiola's taken that next step. Emmett Johnson is a stud, longest run of his career in that game, so on and so forth. Nebraska has been absolutely phenomenal so far this year. Yes, I know there were the hiccups against Cincinnati, and they got an easy opponent in Houston Christian this week. Man, watch out in a couple weeks, though. When Michigan comes to Memorial Stadium, probably going to end up being... No, I think it's actually the 3:30 game on CBS. I was going to say it's a night game, so I'll fact-check myself on that. That Husker team is different. Okay, let's talk about the two upsets that happened, right? Florida fell to USF, and Arizona State fell to Mississippi State. The Bulldogs also another team I considered putting in here at the number 30 position. For Florida, let's start with them. I don't understand that play call late in that game. With that offensive line, with that running back room, you decide to throw the ball on 3rd and short. I don't really understand it. And Florida looked flat in a lot of that game. And I already touched on this in my weekly takeaway video. But man, that Florida schedule is brutal, and they don't get some of these issues and things ironed out. Florida's going to be in for another really, really rough season. They're playing a schedule of teams. You look at Mississippi State, even Mississippi State and Kentucky, probably teams that can contend to get into a bowl game this year. So Florida could be playing all teams, besides, of course, their week 1 opponent in Long Island. All teams that are probably going to end up making a bowl game this year, or at least going to be in contention and fighting for that spot. So Florida's got to get some of those things figured out, man. They got to turn it around really quickly. And for the Arizona State Sun Devils, Sam Leavitt just looked bad. This defense at times looked dreadful, especially on that last touchdown that Mississippi State scored. It's all about cleaning those things up. Sam Leavitt's got to play better, and I still think Arizona State's a really talented team, and their schedule probably not as difficult as what the Gators are going to have to go through. But you never know, right? This is the Big 12. Chaos reigns in the conference. Arizona State, I think, is well more than enough equipped to make a comeback, but we got to see if the Sun Devils are going to end up fixing some of the issues that were prevalent there against Mississippi State. Auburn jumps into the top 25. They're at number 25. Still been impressed from what I've seen out of the Tigers. Pretty simple win for them this past week. Auburn poured it on. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's not working, so I'll look at it. Ball State. They ended up pouring it on Ball State. Really, really liking what I saw from Jackson Arnold as a passer in that game. You didn't see much of that against Baylor, so you finally started to see it against Ball State. Good. He needs to get that passing game moving. Still a great rushing game. Jeremiah Cobb had a fantastic day, and Auburn moves up to 25. Utah. You want to talk about some teams making statements. Utah absolutely pounded Cal Poly. And look, really for the first time in quite some time, this is a Utah team that's going to have a dynamic offense coupled with the defense that can slow you down every which way. They are physical, they are aggressive, and once Utah starts to get rolling a little bit, I think you're going to see them climb this poll a whole lot higher. I want them to look and play a little bit more of a higher caliber opponent. Actually do end up having a bye week, or no, sorry, they go on the road to play Wyoming, who currently is 2-0 at this point. Again, UCLA 0-2. They don't look that great. So when they get into conference play, right, you have Arizona State, you have Texas Tech. Both those games are at home. Got to go on the road to play BYU. You got on the road at Baylor. I think even on the road at Kansas is tough. So once Utah gets in the Big 12 play here, I think we're going to learn a lot more about them. But Devin Dampier looks great. The defense looks awesome, and Utah's a contender in the Big 12. Couple Big 10 teams right here. Indiana at number 23. Still haven't played anybody yet, and they're still going through, I think, a little bit of growing pains with some things, but overall the Hoosiers look good. Don't have much more to say about Indiana. They'll probably hang right around this area until they play some higher level competition and they can get higher. The game against Illinois going to be a fascinating one. Michigan, they do fall to Oklahoma, and relative to where I had them last week, they actually didn't fall that far. Maybe Michigan should end up being a team that's a little bit higher, but I think there are a lot of quality teams in front of them. Bryce Underwood just looked like a freshman last week, period, end of story. And Michigan is by far a team that I think is going to be fine. The defense, I think, showed me a lot against Oklahoma. And we know Bryce Underwood's a really talented kid. They'll bounce back against Central Michigan this week. But then that road game in Lincoln, put on your hard hat because that one is going to be fun. And then Alabama, boy, did they look so much better. Oh, so much better against ULM. And I know it's University of Louisiana Monroe, yada, yada, so on and so forth, but they smashed them. They killed them. And boy, did Ty Simpson actually look impressive this past week after kind of having a very dud performance against Florida State. Only, I want to say, under 150 total yards of offense is what ULM was held to. Alabama, meanwhile, exploded for almost 600. They were terrific on third down. They could run the ball. They could throw the ball. They were a lot more disciplined, even though they still had more penalties than their opponent, which is a trend they have to find a way to buck. Otherwise, though, Bama looked great, and they're going to sit here at number 21. Finally, Bama starting to get into that momentum roll. We move into the top 20 now, and I got Texas Tech right here at number 20. They put the beating on Kent State. Not surprising, as the Golden Flashes are going to be going through some things within that program. So, again, a lot of rebuilding, so on and so forth. So not surprising that Texas Tech able to get that dominating win. Interesting one this week when they play Oregon State. Probably not as key of a matchup as it would have been at the start of the season, but you are getting to play a little bit of a higher level opponent now, are the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I'm going to flat out say it. In my preseason predictions, I think I was a little bit wrong about Tennessee. I had a lot of, I was probably going to end up being quite a lot wrong about the Tennessee. Joey Aguilar is a guy that I think can help lead Tennessee back to the college football playoff. I was very nervous and concerned on how he was going to fit in, not necessarily to the Josh Heupel offense, but just adjust to SEC play. We know he still hasn't played an SEC caliber team. That will come against Georgia this upcoming week. But man, does Tennessee look really, really good. They're throwing points everywhere. And the thing about them relying on defenses more, and you can probably throw that out the window, this offense looks explosive. Joey Aguilar looks like a better fit than Nico did during his time at Tennessee. This is the quarterback that Josh Heupel usually is used to having, a guy that can air it out, throw it long. He's been fantastic so far. And as far as my knowledge goes, has kept the interceptions to a minimum. I am about to fact check myself on that. Defense does look like it needs a little bit of work, though. There are some things defensively I think you could be a little concerned with. And here's Joey Aguilar's stat line on the year: 535 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks, and a pretty solid QBR of right around 70. Watch out for Tennessee, man. They got that one against Georgia at home. They pull that one off. Ooh, you're going to see the Vols skyrocket up these rankings, that's for sure. They already took quite a big jump, and I definitely think a lot more highly of them than I did coming into this year, and that's a credit to what Tennessee has been able to do. Kept Georgia Tech right here at number 18. Still like the Yellow Jackets. They had no Hanks King this week. Hard to take really much away when you play an FCS opponent and you absolutely dominate them. But oh boy, a massive one this week. They got the team that's right across from them on this rankings board, and the Clemson Tigers. And we will talk about Clemson because they did fall from last week, so we'll get to the Tigers when we get there. But Georgia Tech, I think with Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, they're not even in the AP top 25, which I think is criminal. I think Georgia Tech's a good football team, and they got the potential to prove that this week against Clemson. Won't spoil too much about that prediction video. Ole Miss is right here at number 17. Struggled at points with Kentucky, and there was a lot of moments throughout that game where you were asking, oh no, is this going to happen to Ole Miss again? Thankfully to the Rebel fans, it did not. You're able to avenge your loss from last year. You get the win against Kentucky on the road. Austin Simmons really started to turn things up and be able to provide some good things for this Ole Miss offense. Overall, I think Ole Miss is looking pretty darn solid. The Rebels, I believe, are going to end up getting a fairly, okay, so I was going to say it's a fairly interesting game this week. Taylon Green has been balling out for the Arkansas Razorbacks, and Ole Miss has got the Hogs this week. So granted, they get them in Oxford, but an early season tough test for Mississippi, for Ole Miss in SEC play. I think Arkansas is a team that can really give Mississippi a fight, and Hogs versus Rebels should be an interesting one. All right, we got to talk about them now, the USF Bulls. It wasn't the cleanest, it wasn't the prettiest, but you walk out of Gainesville with the win. Don't quote me on saying it's their first win in Gainesville, but it's either their first win in Gainesville or their first win in the Swamp in a long time, something of the nature. It's a historic win for the program nonetheless. And 2007 vibes for this USF team when they were sitting way towards the top of the rankings again in 2007. 18 years later, they're the group of 5 front runner. They're the favorite to get into the college football playoff. They just look like the best group of 5 team. Period. End of story. You already have 2 ranked wins under your belt, ranked at the time of those teams playing. South Florida, you have a chance to get another one, although it's going to be really difficult to go on the road and beat Miami. You got a chance to do it again this week. And if USF does that, I'm telling you right now, they're going to prove to be a top 10 team. If USF goes out and gets that win against Miami this week, they're getting into the top 10. They are, you could even put them in the conversation for a first round bye at that point. But all that's a big if. We got to see how they play out. We'll see if South Florida is going to be able to get that one done. I think it's a really good football team, man. Byron Brown is going to lead this team to do some special, special things this year. And you got to put a watch notice whenever the Bulls are on your television screen. Thought about jumping them over Texas A&M. I was a little hesitant to do it, and so I just went with Texas A&M, sitting there at number 15. Pretty solid performance against the Utah State Aggies. Nothing too crazy that I looked at and saw where I was like, wow, that's a problem. And maybe Aggie fans will point out something in the comment section if we have one watching this video. But otherwise, I thought Texas A&M has looked pretty solid, so on and so forth. Florida State, man, I know they're only sitting here at number 14. Man, I wouldn't blame you for putting Florida State a whole lot higher. Again, how much can you take away when you blow out an FCS team that probably is going to sit maybe towards the mid ranks, if not the bottom? Actually, East Tennessee State's not that bad of a football team in the FCS ranks, if I have that right. Florida State pounded them. I mean, that game was ridiculous to watch. Tuned in for, I think, a full quarter. And when I was watching that, wow, just, oh, God, the carnage, please, dear Lord, let it stop. Florida State just put the hammer on them. They really took it to them. Almost, 730 yards of total offense. That's ridiculous. This is a much improved Florida State team from last year. And this is absolutely going to be a nice rebound season. You got a ton of great games on the schedule. This is the Seminoles team that's going to compete in the ACC. And let's go to one of their ACC rivals in the Clemson Tigers. A lot to talk about with Clemson, isn't there? Because that first half was dreadful. It was horrible. There is no better way to put it. That first half was awful. Clemson started to turn it on, though. You started to see Cade Klubnik get going a little bit. Adam Randall started to get himself going on the ground. Bryant Wesco proving to be that lead receiver for Dabo Swinney's group this year. There are a couple issues with Clemson, and there are a couple unfortunate things too, right? Like turnovers for Clemson were a problem, but they ended up forcing 3 interceptions from Troy. Ultimately, what helped the Tigers win the game. So they buckled up their chin straps when they had to, but man, you got no business only beating Troy by 11. That should have at least been a 20-point win. I think Troy's got some good pieces, but Clemson's on a much more talented level than they are. You got some concerns about the Tigers, and they could be elevated have they go on the road this week and lose to Georgia Tech, especially if it's by quite the wide margin. So a big game to keep an eye on there, but you drop Clemson because of the performance, but we know everything is still in front of this team. Actually, as I horribly end up flubbing their record, they are 1-1, not 2-0. So if you're someone that skips through the video, yes, I know I got the Clemson record wrong. I know they're 1-1. Deal with it. Sorry about it. Clemson's there at number 13, and we move on into the top 12. After a quick water break, because of course, it's important to stay hydrated. Iowa State, one of the only teams in the country to play 3 games so far this year. Oh, UNLV, another one that's really close to cracking into this Power 30. Iowa State's looked pretty solid so far this year. You get the rivalry win over the Iowa Hawkeyes. First time that the Cy-Hawk Trophy has been won by the same team back-to-back in really quite some time. So you got to give Iowa State their flowers in being able to do that. Very, very good, impressive stuff from the Iowa State Cyclones. I really liked what I saw. Of course, you knew that the Cy-Hawk Trophy battle was going to end up being a defensive affair. Rocco Becht looked about as good as he could given the circumstances. And this run game again, big runs when it matters most. They weren't ripping off chunk yardage runs, Sama and Hansen, but they were grinding things out, really helping along this Iowa State offense. And of course, the game-winning field goal towards the end there held Iowa to only 214 yards. Thought the defense looked pretty darn solid. Each team forced a turnover. Iowa forgot how to throw a forward pass. It's your usual Cy-Hawk Trophy battle, but the Cyclones came out on top. They were the better team that day, and now they sit at 3-0. South Carolina does fall out of the top 10, and you get a little bit nitpicky with South Carolina. In fact, I don't even think you have to get that nitpicky to look at it. There are some issues with the way that South Carolina is looking. The offense does not look as good as it could. And South Carolina at one point was really struggling with I think it was South Carolina State was the team that they ended up playing this week. And again, much like Clemson with Troy, that's almost kind of worse. So you have no business playing that close to an FCS opponent. Now, eventually they came back. They slaughtered them 38-10. Yeah, sure, whatever. But man, getting off to a slow start like that against the team that you got coming up later on in your schedule. I know LSU is still on that schedule. We got to play Ole Miss at one point this year. Oklahoma, who looks really good. You can't afford to get out to those slow starts. And so some things to clean up for South Carolina, but I still think they're a really good football team. They sit at number 11. Wouldn't even argue you if Iowa State was above them, which I definitely did consider. All right, here is your new top 10. Some very notable additions to this list. Oklahoma being the big one there at number 10. I still think Oklahoma can play better than what they played against Michigan. I think John Mateer can let the football fly a little bit more, although, he's starting to round Deion Burks into that primary guy. You started to see things out of Deion Burks that you need to see out of Deion Burks. So really excited to see that for this Oklahoma offense. John Mateer is the engine that's going to drive Ben Arbuckle's unit all season long. Throwing the football, running the football. He is simply fantastic. And then that defense took a very nice step in the right direction. Had a little bit of time, or I should say a little bit of trouble containing Justice Haynes at points. But that, to a certain point, is to be expected. Justice Haynes is a very, very good running back. But Oklahoma's defense, I thought, looked much better than it has in previous seasons, especially in a lot of big game scenarios. They came up with the big stops. They made Bryce Underwood look like, well, a freshman that was playing in his first road game. I thought the secondary played pretty darn well, and Oklahoma's going to slot in here to the top 10. That's a big win for that program, man. Good for Brent Venables to be able to finally get that big win, and you can feel something brewing in Norman now. Not going to say much about Notre Dame. They were on bye, so I honestly didn't even really move them. I don't think Oklahoma jumped them, so on and so forth. Big one for Notre Dame this week. Texas A&M rolls into town, and we'll find out a lot more about the Irish. Again, they kicked off their season with Miami, and now you got to play the Texas A&M Aggies. So that'll be a fun, interesting one to watch this weekend. One of the better matchups that you'll see this weekend as well. The Illinois Fighting Illini. To me, they are not the surprise of the weekend, but they made the statement of the weekend. Duke is a good football team, okay? You watch that game, and I know Duke really struggled. They had the 5 turnovers. They had the penalties. They lost time of possession, yada, yada, yada. Duke is a good football team. Darian Mensah balled out over 330 yards passing. I think that Duke team is, going to be a pretty solid one out of the ACC. But man, was this Illinois team so impressive. The defense was absolutely spectacular. Luke Altmaier never had to be a game-breaking, game-wrecking quarterback, but he threw for nearly 300 yards. And when this is an Illinois team that opens up that pass game, especially if they're able to get this run game going, my goodness, are they just such a dangerous team to try to defend? They got great skill position players in the backfield. They have amazing skill position guys in this wide receiver room that are really, really fun to watch. My preseason pick for Illinois to get into the college football playoff looking pretty darn good right about now. That Illinois secondary made Darian Mensah look silly. This is an Illinois team that made Duke and Manny Diaz look silly all afternoon long. They were moving them up and down the field, and it was a tight-knit game for a lot of it, and then the turnovers started to pile up. Illinois capitalized off of them. They pulled away at the end. Boy, was I impressed with what I saw out of the Fighting Illini this past week. They move all the way up to number 8. I think Illinois is the real deal, and they're going to have a ton of opportunities to prove themselves this year. You obviously have Ohio State coming into Champaign. You get Indiana. Illinois got a lot of very interesting games coming up on the schedule, and I can't wait to watch what Brett Bielema's group is capable of this season. Was very impressed and a little surprised by a couple things that I saw there, but in the best way possible, right? Texas is going to stay here at number 7. And, Texas did look better. Yes, true. The concerns are starting to pile up for Arch Manning with me. Just looking at his throwing mechanics, I don't like it. It doesn't look pretty to me. And look, if it works, it works, okay? It doesn't have to look pretty as long as he's making the throws. But he's throwing with pain. And I think part of it is his throwing mechanic. I think there's got to be someone in there that's saying, dude, we got to change how you throw, or we got to change this about something. We got to change that. I think something's got to change because he was throwing at one point in that game against San Jose State and grimacing really, really violently in pain. Not like stupidly violently, but you could tell like the dude was in some pain. The shoulder was hurting him. First of all, why are you throwing if your shoulder's hurting you? You're one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country. I still do believe that. But, the concerns are starting to pile up. Do people need to take a step back of their expectations? Yes, absolutely. But this is an Arch Manning kid that's still got all the talent there. He's got to start being able to consistently make those throws. I thought he was better, but there are still some growing pains that I think Arch Manning needs to go through before Texas enters the swamp and has to play still, even with the loss, a really talented Florida side. Georgia fell to number 6, and that's not due to their part. Again, they had the weird lightning storm thing. Still able to beat Austin Peay. Defense looked good. Gunnar Stockton looked good. So not going to take too much away from that one. But man, was there one very specific team that I was very impressed with this past week? And we'll get to them in just a moment. But Miami is right here at number 5. We got to start with the Hurricanes. Did what they had to do. Slaughtered Bethune-Cookman. Carson Beck looked good. Defense looked good. Everything looked good for this Miami team. And an interesting test this week. South Florida is going to come into Hard Rock Stadium. Look, man, don't discount that Bulls team. Florida did it, and you saw what happened to them. Boise State, I don't think they discounted them. I just don't think Boise State played a great game. But, man, South Florida's really talented. Byron Brown is a dog. They got a good defense. Miami, I think, is going to have their fits this week, and that's one of the bigger matchups in Week 3. The team I was impressed with and the team that I think needs to start getting some more mention is the Oregon Ducks. Look at what they did to Oklahoma State. No holds barred. They were all hands on deck, put pedal to the metal. Oh my goodness. Dante Moore and this Oregon team look absolutely filthy. Filthy offensively, and the defense stood on its head too. They won by 66 points over a Power 4 team. And I understand it's Oklahoma State. They had the injury to their starting quarterback. They're trying to rebuild both sides of the ball after a disappointing year last year. I get it. But 69-3? Holy moly. Dante Moore has been on fire these first 3 weeks, and Oregon, after being the number 1 team in the country last year, and now a lot of people, people are talking about Penn State, people are talking about LSU, now they're talking about Miami and Texas and Georgia. Not a lot of love being thrown Oregon's way. I'll give some to them here. They're going to sit at number 4. I've been very impressed with the way that Oregon has played, but obviously LSU has got that marquee win against Clemson, so I'm putting them above. But man, LSU did not look fantastic this past week against La Tech. 23-7, I believe, was that final score. You definitely could have won by a lot more than that. Same goes for Penn State. They struggled at points, especially in that first half against FIU. Really struggling to move the football at points, so on and so forth. Penn State had 409 yards of total offense. You saw Drew Aller struggle with a couple of things here and there. For LSU, when you take a look at their box score, again, 23-7 against La Tech, you're thinking, yeesh, what happened? Garrett Nussmeier did not look like his usual self. Run game was not going at full speed. In fact, Caden Durham just didn't have a Caden Durham night. Only 13 carries for 29 yards. Granted, had a touchdown. So 2 teams that I'm still going to keep in the top 3 because long term, I'm not too worried about the amount of success that they're going to find. But boy, did they just have some not so great performances this past week. And the number 1 team in the country did against an opponent they should have handled. Julian Sand looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country. The secondary is absolutely ridiculous. Offensive skill position players are there. Defensive front is getting great pressure. The only thing you can nitpick with Ohio State is you probably want them to generate some more sacks because they're getting pressure, but these quarterbacks are having a lot of time to throw, and they're lucky that it didn't hurt them more with Arch Manning, because again, I still think the kid's really talented, but when they have to play Penn State in the regular season and Drew Aller's got all the time in the world, well, what's going to happen? Even Luke Altmaier at Illinois, Parker Navarro this week at Ohio. So start being able to finish those blitzes. But the Buckeyes, I think, cemented themselves as of right now as the top team in the country in that dominant win over Grambling State. Hey, let me know what you think about Week 3 and your top 25, top 30, top 10, whatever it is that you end up putting out. Feel free to leave it in the comment section below. And remember, as always, play hard but tailgate harder. We'll start diving into some of the bigger matchups of Week 3 here in the coming days. Talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Goodbye.